What if your personality isn't who you are, but who you became when no one came for you? When you needed safety and found silence? When you needed love and learned performance? When your body shook with fear and no one noticed? So the mind, quiet and brilliant, began to build, not a future, a defense. You think you're cold, distant, too intense, too quiet, too much, not enough. But none of these are truths. They're strategies, invisible algorithms coded in the moment your nervous system said, never again. Never again will I feel this helpless. Never again will I need and not receive. And so you adapted. You called it personality, but it's camouflage. Identity stitched from absence. A collection of echoes from everything you weren't allowed to express. And the longer you wear it, the more it feels like you. But deep inside, something protests. A soft resistance. A whisper you can't name. The ache behind your eyes when you lie to yourself. The tension in your jaw when someone gets too close. The longing for connection, wrapped in fear of being seen. This isn't about trauma as memory. This is about trauma as architecture. The mind doesn't need to remember. It only needs to react. That's why you still flinch when no one raised their voice. Why you freeze when things go well. Why you run when love feels real. Because the system inside is still working for a war that ended long ago. And that's the tragedy, that the same intelligence that once saved you now keeps you repeating the wound. So the real question isn't, why am I like this? It's, who did I have to become in order to survive? And beneath that, who was I before the pain wrote my story? If something moved inside you while listening, don't keep it buried. The mind heals when you give voice to what it tried to silence. Comment below, even if you don't know what to say. Write what hurt, write what echoed, or just leave the sentence that marks your return to self. I'm coming back to myself. This is not a performance. This is a ritual, a moment of presence. When you comment, you don't just express, you anchor. You mark the exact second when the unconscious began to awaken. And if you felt seen, it means you're ready for the next layer. Because from here, we descend into the place where it all began. Not in logic, in emotion. The root moment when the mind decided to survive. I must transform. Take a breath, and let's go back together. There was a moment long before you could explain anything when you simply felt too much. Maybe you were a child in a room filled with tension. Maybe no one raised their voice, but the silence screamed. Maybe someone you loved kept disappearing emotionally. Or maybe they were too present in all the wrong ways, and your body felt it all. Fear without name, sadness without language, abandonment without explanation. The nervous system lit up, and without knowing how or why, your mind made its first psychological deal. This is too much, so I will split from what I feel. That's when the defense began, not as a choice, but as a reflex. Your system didn't ask for permission. It simply adjusted. It created new ways to protect you, not from the world, but from the pain of feeling too much of it. You didn't become silent. You were silenced by emotional overload. You didn't become detached. You were forced to retreat inward. You didn't become cold. You froze what once burned too deeply. And because the shift was so early, so primal, you didn't notice. You grew up thinking, this is just who I am. But it wasn't. It was who you became to survive an invisible war. A war between what your heart needed and what reality provided. What's tragic is that it worked. Your mind succeeded in protecting you, but at a cost. The cost of disconnection, the price of numbness, the toll of never feeling fully alive, even when things are good. This pattern, this psychological shield became your personality. You called it identity, but it was adaptation, emotional engineering, built on necessity, not choice. You flinch at affection, but not because you hate it. You overthink every message, but not because you're irrational. You shut down when you're seen, but not because you're cold. It's all because your body remembers the moment it decided. Connection equals pain, and so it created distance, space, silence, not as rejection, but as protection. This is what people don't understand about trauma. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It disguises itself as your preferences, your attitudes, your habits. But beneath them, there is one emotion still vibrating: fear. Fear of repeating the original wound. And this fear becomes a compass. You navigate life, avoiding anything that resembles the original pain. Yet, somehow, you keep finding it. Not because you want to, but because your nervous system is tuned to it. It seeks the familiar. It chooses pain wrapped in recognition. You find partners who feel like old wounds. You repeat patterns that mimic early chaos. You create crises just to feel something real. And each time it happens, the defense grows stronger. It says, "See, the world is still unsafe. Stay armored." But what if the world changed and your defense didn't? What if the danger ended and your mind never got the memo? The child inside you still believes it's not safe to feel, but you're not that child anymore. You can rewrite the code, not by force, not by erasing the past, but by returning to that inner moment and offering something new, presence, to hold the pain with your adult self, to show that part of you what it never had. Someone who stays, someone who doesn't escape when it hurts, someone who listens when the fear rises. Because that's all the defense ever wanted, to not feel abandoned again. And once it trusts that you are here, something beautiful happens. The armor begins to soften. The silence begins to speak. The self you buried begins to breathe again. Pain has a strange gravity. It pulls you back to what broke you. Not because you want to suffer, but because your nervous system has confused suffering with safety. The chaos you once escaped from became the rhythm your body now recognizes. And in that rhythm, there is comfort. This is emotional addiction, a craving for what feels familiar, even if it hurts. You don't wake up thinking, "I want to repeat the trauma," but your system is trained to seek intensity, and unresolved pain is intensely charged. It activates you. It makes you feel alive, even if the cost is another heartbreak, another spiral, another silent scream. This is why peace feels boring, why kindness feels suspicious, why healthy relationships feel distant. They don't match the emotional language you were raised in. They speak softly when you're used to yelling. They feel calm when you're wired for survival. So, you provoke the chaos. You find small ways to create storms. Pick fights over silence. Doubt people who stay. Sabotage what finally feels good. And then you call it fate. Say things like, "I knew this wouldn't last." But deep down, you didn't know. You created it because the absence of pain felt too unfamiliar to be trusted. Your mind seeks what it understands. And pain, you understand it fluently. Think about how many times you've repeated the same emotional loop. The same argument, the same rupture, the same goodbye that feels like home. That loop is not coincidence. It's programming, and at the center of it lies the belief, if I relive it enough times, maybe this time it won't hurt. Maybe this time someone will choose me. Maybe this time I won't be abandoned. But pain doesn't redeem itself through repetition. It deepens. And your mind, though brilliant, is stuck in that cycle, seeking resolution to reenactment. That's the lie, that if you bleed the same way, someone will finally see you. But the truth is harsher. No one can rescue a wound you keep reopening. The only way out is through, not through the chaos, but through the discomfort of peace, through the awkward silence of stability, through the slow process of teaching your nervous system that calm is not a threat, that presence is not a trap, that love doesn't have to come with pain. But this is not instant. The brain is addicted to patterns. Dopamine doesn't differentiate between healthy and harmful. It just reacts to what's intense and repeated. So emotional chaos becomes chemically reinforced. Drama equals reward. That's why the letdown after peace feels unbearable. Not because peace is wrong, but because your system is in withdrawal. This is the moment most people quit healing. When calm arrives and it feels empty. When nothing is wrong but the body still waits for an explosion. That's not a failure. That's detox. That's your nervous system letting go of the familiar poison. And in that space, If you breathe, if you stay, something new begins. A quiet, a tremble, then clarity. You start to notice the difference between comfort and repetition, between love and attachment, between desire and addiction. And when that awareness takes root, the cycle weakens. You don't need to suffer to prove you feel. You don't need chaos to justify your pain. You don't need to bleed to be loved. What you need now is stillness. Not forever, just long enough for your system to recalibrate, for your body to learn what your soul has always known. You were never meant to live in survival mode. You were made to feel fully, without fear, without collapse. Pain may still visit, but it no longer has to be your home. There comes a point when the mind stops pretending and starts believing. The mask you once wore to survive becomes your face. The silence becomes your voice. The avoidance becomes your map. You no longer say, "I'm protecting myself." You say, "This is just who I am." But it's not. You are not your defense. You are the one hiding underneath it, still breathing, still watching, still hoping to be found. This shift from defense to identity is slow and invisible. You don't feel it happening. It creeps in through repetition, through the stories you tell yourself. "I'm just not emotional. I'm better off alone. I don't trust anyone." You think you're stating facts, but you're actually reciting wounds. These sentences are not your truth. They are scars that learned how to speak. And each time you say them, you reinforce the belief that the real you is too much, too soft, too unsafe. So you wear the mask longer. You polish it. You decorate it. You build relationships through it. You make decisions through it. You navigate life without ever letting anyone see who you are without it. Until one day, you forget who that is. That forgetting is not a failure. It's a symptom of survival. You had to adapt. You had to hide the parts of you that once hurt too deeply. But now, you're not hiding. You're gone. Not in body. In essence, you laugh, but it's not joy. You love, but it's guarded. You succeed, but it's hollow. And deep down, you know something is missing. That something is your real self buried beneath layers of emotional armor. And the longer you avoid it, the heavier it becomes. The more convincing the mask feels. Until even you can't tell if you're living or just performing. This is the grief of healing. To realize you've spent years becoming someone who never really existed, only endured. To look at your life and wonder how many choices were made by fear pretending to be personality. But grief is not the end. It's the threshold. To move forward, you must let go not of who you are, but of who you believed you had to be. That belief was never yours. It was built in moments of pain, in glances of disappointment, in the coldness of absence, in the betrayal of love. And it taught you one thing: you are safer when you're not fully seen. But healing demands visibility, not to the world, to yourself. To look in the mirror and whisper, "I miss me." To touch the places inside that you've neglected. To admit that independence was often loneliness, that strength was sometimes suppression, that silence was self-protection. And when you do, the mask begins to loosen. You start to feel again, not all at once, not with comfort, but with truth. Tears you thought had dried return. Laughter that once felt forced becomes spontaneous. Needs you silenced begin to speak. This is not regression, it's remembering. Remembering what joy feels like without conditions. What connection feels like without calculation. What love feels like without armor. But it's frightening, because the mask gave you power. It gave you control. It made life predictable, even if it was painful. Removing it means surrendering certainty. It means facing the world without your usual filters. But here's what you gain: yourself, fully unmasked, vulnerable, alive. This is not weakness. It's the beginning of wholeness. And when you live from wholeness, everything changes, not because the world becomes safer, but because you are no longer ruled by fear. You are no longer a performance. You are real. Integration is not the light at the end of the tunnel. It is the light you find while still inside it. A soft, trembling glow that rises when you stop fighting your darkness and begin to listen. To sit with your fears. To touch your sadness. to witness your patterns without flinching. This is where healing becomes real, not through erasing the past, but through embracing it as part of your wholeness. You were never meant to cut away the wounded parts. They are not mistakes. They are unprocessed memories, longing to be held. And when you begin to hold them with presence instead of judgment, something shifts. The child inside stops screaming. The nervous system softens. The reflex to run fades. This is the return to self, not as a goal, but as a practice. A slow, circular movement toward what was always there, but hidden under survival. You don't become someone new. You become more of who you were before. Pain taught you to fragment, and that becoming is built on 3 pillars: acceptance, compassion, courage. Acceptance to say, this is my pain, these are my patterns, I see them now. Compassion to say, I did what I had to, I survived the only way I knew. Courage to say, I can choose differently now. These aren't affirmations, they're movements, internal rewirings, energetic choices made in silence. When the trigger rises and you breathe instead of collapse. When the fear speaks and you stay present. When the voice says run and you say, I'm staying with me, you begin to lead yourself. That's what healing is, becoming your own safe place. And from that place, the mind begins to reorganize. Old beliefs lose power, not because you argue with them, but because they are no longer necessary. You don't need to believe love equals pain if you've experienced love without harm. You don't need to repeat rejection if you've finally chosen yourself, and that choosing is quiet. You won't announce it. You'll feel it in small ways, in the pause before reacting, in the soft no that honors your boundary, in the yes that doesn't require betrayal. This is integration. When the parts of you that once fought each other begin to work together. When the protector, the wounded, the performer, the pleaser, the child, they all come to sit at one table, and you, the conscious self, take the seat at the center. You're no longer dominated by one fragment. You are the space that holds them all. And in that space, life feels different. Slower, truer, not easier, but more aligned. Because you're not living to be safe, you're living to be whole. That wholeness will scare you at times, because it comes with feeling, real, raw, unpredictable feeling. But it also comes with clarity, with growingness, with the kind of joy that doesn't spike, it expands. You become capable of peace without boredom, of love without collapse, of solitude without fear. And maybe for the first time, you realize you're home, not in someone else, not in a place, in yourself. The journey didn't fix you, it revealed you. And now, every breath carries a new message. I no longer have to defend who I am. I remember now, if you're still here, it's not by chance. Something inside you wanted to be witnessed, not by the world, by you. You've just walked through memories you didn't remember having, through patterns that looked like personality, but were always protection, through wounds that never screamed but shaped everything. Now, you know, and knowing is the beginning of liberation. But don't rush to escape this feeling. Stay with it, let it settle, let it echo, because the mind that carried your pain is also the mind that can carry your healing. All it needed was permission, awareness, space, and now you've given it. Now it's time to speak, not to explain, to anchor. Leave your imprint below, in the comment space. Say what moved you, say what hurt, say what awakened, or simply write the phrase that brought us together in silence. I'm coming back to myself, not for performance, for presence. Every comment here is a signal, a light in the collective field that says, I'm not alone. I feel this too. I remember. This space is not an audience. It's a circle. And every time you speak, you remind someone else that they are not crazy, broken, or doomed. They're just remembering, like you. So breathe, and if something cracked open, let it. You don't need to know what comes next. You only need to stay open, because this is only the beginning. In the next episodes, we will go deeper into the roots of self-sabotage, into the illusions of identity, into the shadow of your subconscious mind, You'll see how inherited trauma moves through generations, how the guilt you carry may not be yours, how your darkest thoughts may not be personal, but ancestral. And in that exploration, you'll find the most uncomfortable truth. You were never who they told you to be. You were always something older, deeper, more sacred. So subscribe if you're ready to continue, not for content, for continuity, for expansion. Activate the bell like a symbol, a ritual, a whisper to your mind. I want to remember, because memory is not always of the past. Sometimes it's of who you were before the wound. This is your path. This is your circle. This is your return.